Welcome everyone to our 10:30 a.m. session, The Future of Streaming TV. We are joined by our speakers, Scott Rosenberg, SVP of Platform Business at Roku, and Bill Simmons, VP of Product Management of Ad Platform at Roku. Welcome to both of you and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. All right, I'll kick us off here. I'm Scott Rosenberg. I'm an LFM graduate of 2003. LFM is a degree that doesn't exist anymore. It's now called the LGO program. And I was courses 6 and 15, and Bill's an Aero-Astro grad from with a PhD from 2008. So I'll head off here. I run the media business, what we call the platform business at Roku, and I'll hand it to Bill for the meaty stuff. Maybe we go to the next slide, Bill. So I'm sure I don't have to convince this audience that streaming is mainstream. The traditional pay TV, what we would call linear television viewing at Roku is collapsing, especially with the advent of COVID. Today, about a third of all TV time is streamed as opposed to watched through your cable or your satellite provider. And about half of the time of adults 18 to 34 is now spent streaming instead of watching on linear television. We've seen huge new services like Disney Plus launch, as well as really every major media company prioritize streaming over the last couple of years. I think it's obvious to everybody in the business that streaming is the way all television will eventually be watched. And we already have about 3/4 of U.S. households with at least one connected TV device like Roku. Many of those households have more than one. And over the next couple of years, we'll see a continued exodus out of the traditional pay TV ecosystem. Today, there's 85 million households that have cable or satellite TV service, and many of those households will leave pay TV television over the next couple of years. Maybe we can flip to the next slide, Bill. Just a little bit about Roku without sounding too salesy. For folks who like to be part of growth or early stage companies, Roku's DNA is still very much a startup, even though we've been around for nearly 2 decades. You probably know us as a company that makes sticks or streaming pucks, but we also build ourselves directly into televisions. That's one of the fastest ways that we're growing our user base. We also have audio products which set up very seamlessly with our television so that you can get that full surround sound. Today we have about 40 million active accounts, which is basically a household. Most of those are US based, although we're expanding rapidly internationally. We are a public company. We took the company public in late 2017. And really, if you take a look at all the icons in the bottom left here, we're a who's who of everybody who's participating in streaming. This is the list of the top 10 channels by streaming hours at Roku. Last year, we did our first major acquisition. That's how I got to meet Bill. Bill's a co-founder of a company called DataZoo. It was an important new element in Roku's ad business. And we did about a little over $1 billion in revenue last year. And roughly 2/3 of that was hardware-based. And then, 2/3 of that was media-based, so money that we derive from selling subscriptions or advertising. And then the other third was our hardware business. This is something that surprises a lot of people because I think many folks who haven't met us in the commercial sense might think that all our revenues derive from hardware, but in fact, it's just the opposite. Just looking, kind of setting Bill up here. Bill, if you could flip to the next slide. One of the ways in which streaming is transforming the television business is TV advertising. About half of all the money that flows into television comes from the money that we pay to our cable operator. The other half actually comes from advertising. And streaming is really transforming how TV advertising is going to work. And it really enables an advertiser to reach users who are no longer in the traditional pay TV ecosystem, to target and measure them very precisely in a way that's not possible in a broadcast methodology, and ultimately also to give users new ad experiences. One thing that's abundantly clear in streaming is that the user is just much more empowered. They have an interactive device through which they watch television. They have near infinite choice, and so consumers are going to be more selective with the kind of content they experience and the way they experience it. And that also means they're going to expect more out of advertising. And this all plays a very fundamental role in how we think about advertising at Roku, especially, as Bill will discuss, our uses of machine learning, for example, to deliver a better ad experience. Bill, can you flip the next slide? Just a little bit of market context. When streaming started, the game consoles loomed large. They were kind of the default, most highly distributed devices through which people could stream. I'm talking specifically about Xbox and PlayStation. Streaming was never a large part of the usage of those devices, but in terms of distribution footprint, they were bigger. Over the last couple of years, dedicated streaming devices like Roku, like Amazon Fire, Apple TV, Google Chromecast have really surged in terms of the number of households they reach. And in particular, the smart TV itself has become the fastest growing contributor to streaming users, certainly in the Roku ecosystem. About a third of all smart TVs have Roku in it now. Today, I think about 75–80% of all TVs that are sold are smart. You won't be able to buy a dumb TV in short order, and that means you're going to get your smart TV operating system built in. And this is a key way that the ecosystem is accelerating.
Great.
Next slide, Bill. I'm gonna hand it to Bill here actually to talk about our use of machine learning and data science at Roku. Thanks.
Yeah. So thanks, Scott. It's a bit of context. I co-founded DataZoo back in 2008, coming out of MIT, where I worked on combinatorial optimization in uncertain spaces. And we had this idea that you can take lots of data and you pump it through machine learning and AI techniques, and you can make better decisions, which today, probably sounds like an obvious idea, but back then it was like, oh, how can a small team do this? This is impossible. I mean, Hadoop wasn't really there yet, and AWS was a tiny, offshoot of Amazon at that point, with 3 services. So it was exciting to see this field become known as data science and big data. I just wanted to give a little bit of background on how we see it and how we've been successful. First of all, like what's a great data scientist? And I think, this is different from other roles because you've got to have a combination of 3 skills, which don't often go together. You need software skills to be able to deal with the big data. You need statistics skills. You need to really know what you're doing there, more than the basics. And you need to have a business intuition about what would be valuable and what wouldn't. And having all 3 of those things makes you an expert. It is possible to build data science teams with people with 2 of the 3 skills. So say if you're good at statistics and business, you're more like an analyst. If you're good at statistics and software, you're really good at implementing ideas that come from someone who understands the business. If you're good at business and software, you're more like a product manager. So you can put together teams, but those really unicorn, insightful data scientists have all 3. The goals generally come from, business strategy. Like, for example, Roku wants people to watch more Roku, right? But then also continuous improvement, implementing the latest techniques and improving what's already there. But really, inspiration is an important thing because the data scientists are seeing things in a very different light. They may come up with a completely fresh idea based on a paper they may have read about a new technique, combined with data that's available and the business goals that can inspire the company. So it's important that that group has the leeway. So that's the first bullet I have on process and attitude, is like, you got to give at least some time to explore. It can't be all prescribed. You need to give these thinkers a space to invent. I think we've while that sounds loosey-goosey, we've also developed a really strict pipeline from idea to test to learn and refine of all ideas. You get a point every time you advance. And then my last bullet is you get a point when you kill a project. Really important that you reward killing a project, because otherwise you end up in a rat hole going on forever. You have to celebrate it. You killed that quickly. Good job. The other one is that we've made work is making the tight interplay between data science and engineering such that the infrastructure they use for developing research looks just like what we do in production, so that when something is proven, you can get it to production very quickly. You don't have to recode it. And also that the data scientist carries it all the way through. They don't just write up a report and hand it off. They've got to do end-to-end from concept to production in QA and maintenance. So with that, I just want to sort of fine tune this into applications. So the obvious one in streaming TV is maximizing engagement. So recommendation engine sort of made famous by the Netflix prize that started out in 2006 about trying to do a better job of recommending, the next movie to people. And it's become more and more complicated now in streaming because there's movies and channels, there's a recommendation of what image to show to promote a movie, and then you overlay it with, all the different revenue models that are available. So if we're trying to maximize corporate revenue, it gets to be a quite complex problem. Advertising optimization is what DataZoo did. We built a company that built technologies for buyers of advertising to place the right ad to the right person at the right moment in order to maximize return on investment, and including, determining what price to pay. Fighting fraud, advertising ecosystem has tremendous incentives to invent fake traffic, and there's a constant cat and mouse game to, discover new anomalies. In the early days, it was obvious stuff like, just millions and millions of clicks coming from one browser. And now very clever fraudsters have built human-like interaction with content, and you have to build more and more sophisticated detection for those things. So there's a huge opportunity to invest there. Identity graphs. So this is an interesting problem in today's world. People carry around multiple devices. I have 4 that I use all the time: my laptop, my phone, my tablet, and TV. The way I interact with commercial products and advertising crosses all those things. I generally buy on the 3 things that have browsers, but I see advertising on the big screen in the living room. Through the use of AI, you're able to better understand which devices cluster into a person or into a household, and eliminate the things that are sort of false signals. So then the last 2, are maybe more obvious to people in the audience who use CTV. More and more people are turning to voice in order to find content, and they don't ask a well-structured question. Quite often they say something like, "Show me shark movies," and they don't mean a movie that has shark in the title. They meant Jaws. Or so, understanding the context, the most likely meaning of that question without asking annoying follow-up questions is quite a difficult problem. And of course, search, surfacing as fast and as high up and as easily as possible for the kinds of content you want. And I was thinking a little bit about what the future looks like. I think we're starting to see in the mobile ecosystem and the CTV ecosystem, devices that are a little bit more anticipatory of the user's needs, surfacing the kind of content they might want to watch at that moment. More and more my phone is, saying Siri says you want to look at this, and they're right, like you want to look at this news, you want to look at that thing, or you're going to be commuting here, or most likely you go to your karate practice on Tuesday, which, in today's world I don't, but it's not quite smart enough to know about COVID. So with that, I'm happy to answer any free-form questions, and Scott and I are excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you both for your presentation. It looks like we're having a couple of questions come in from the audience. So the first, how do you balance resource allocation between data scientists, programmers, and business or product domain analysts within Roku?
I guess the question is like, what's the right proportions and mix?
Yeah, or how do people from those 3 backgrounds work together?
Yeah, so generally we found, data scientists to machine learning or implementation engineers for those kinds of systems is like maybe 1 to 3. We think data scientists can really handle, we found it's successful to handle one large project that's a big long-term goal, a medium-sized one, and one or two smalls, so that at any given time they can balance those three. Business analysts, it really depends on the business. At Roku, we have analysts that are looking at the fundamentals of Roku's business, but also we have analysts that are building insights and strategies for our advertising clients. So that team actually is about a similar size. Combination of the analysts and the customer-facing analysts is probably a little bit larger than the data science team.
Wow, that's really good insight. The second question comes in. So the idea behind a subscription model is to eliminate ads and to provide a better user experience for the user. So is there a way to incorporate ads without alienating subscribers? Is there a happy medium between the two? What do you envision for that?
I'll take that. It's not the only idea behind subscriptions to eliminate ads. It's an idea for some users. And I say that because many consumers are very price sensitive. And one thing we've seen as consumers leave the pay television ecosystem and come into streaming is they're looking for value. They don't want to pay $80 or $100 a month for their pay TV service. And so maybe they'll have Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus, but are they going to have 5, 6, 7 subscriptions? Unlikely, especially if those subscriptions are $7, $8, $10, $13 a piece. So we see advertising playing a role of expanding the set of content that a consumer can experience without having to pay for it. And it really comes in two forms: content that's completely free and content that's partially subsidized with advertising. So if you look at a service like CBS All Access or Hulu, some of the new services that are launching, they're actually hybrid models where you pay a monthly subscription and you experience ads. As for not irritating the consumer with advertising, which I think is the gist of the question, I do think we live in a world where consumers are just so much more highly empowered. And so it's just not going to be acceptable for a user to have to experience 15, 16 minutes of advertising for every hour of TV that they watch, which is what it is in the pay TV ecosystem. So our view is ad loads need to come way down, possibly as low as half or less. And the ads need to get smarter. They need to be more relevant to you, more engaging. So part of the answer is advertisers have to work harder to earn your attention.
Yeah, there is one version of that answer that is very on theme with the AI theme, is that, I've always felt like the augmented reality technology, probably its best application is in substituting products inside content in a seamless way. So like the can of soda on the table during a scene can be Coke, it can be Pepsi, it can be Dr. Pepper. Using almost like a deep fake technology, you can insert whoever pays. Where it gets really interesting is if that's individualized to the particular user who's watching the show. That hasn't been scaled or invented yet, but it is completely possible to do something like that.
Definitely. So our next question is, at Roku, have you considered maybe adding video conferencing to your product set, since you guys work so closely with hardware? And if so, what are your thoughts on that?
I think certainly relative to even a few months ago, we all appreciate how important video conferencing has become. It's really transformed how we all work, as evidenced by our session here today. So it is an area of interest for us. And, there's a lot of experimentation going on in the industry right now, including a lot of co-viewing experiences. There isn't a uniform co-viewing thing that's come up, but something that lets people experience the same movie or TV show at the same time is also a very popular emerging use case.
Yeah, we've definitely seen a lot of emerging trends in the past couple months due to our lifestyle changes. So our other question, so we've seen a recent trend of vertical integration between streaming services and production itself. Do you see that trend continuing? What are the pros and cons of this kind of vertical integration? And what is the future of that?
Well, certainly it is a strategy and one that many of the large media companies have employed. I think when you think about the consumer and their decision to download, subscribe, use a service, it's a little different than your decision to purchase a Roku device, but your decision to subscribe to Disney Plus, may be informed by your desire to watch Mandalorian, which you can only get on Disney Plus. And so that's why I think you've seen all these major services invest heavily in originals, because at the end of the day, they need a steady drumbeat of originals to ensure that you download, use, subscribe to that service regularly. The business has also become very global very quickly. It's really raised the stakes. If companies can't invest really tens of billions of dollars in content, which you can only really do if you're running a global business, then you may not be programming enough for the size audiences that you're looking to reach. And that itself has set up a very interesting dynamic in the business where, somebody like Disney very clearly decided they wanted to be in the direct-to-consumer streaming business, but they're investing tens of billions of dollars. Many traditional TV companies, brands that we have grown up loving and watching, may not actually have that scale to produce programming, to be a direct-to-consumer content brand long-term. And so those companies may choose to actually be further back in the value chain and be a production company and produce great content, but they may not be producing dozens or hundreds of TV series a year like you see out of somebody like Netflix. So there isn't one strategy for success here, but certainly the biggest, highest profile new services that we're seeing are companies that are investing tens of billions of dollars in that content. For Roku, our strategy is to be a place where all those services can live and ultimately come compete for user attention. That's our focus as a company.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think companies that have had the strong push towards digitization have been really successful in the past couple months. I'm curious, what are your thoughts, or what are the biggest risks of this kind of coronavirus era to Roku that you see?
Well, I will say that coronavirus has actually driven a lot of TV consumption. We're all home and looking to self-entertain. So TV viewership is up in streaming. It's actually fallen. It's flat to down with traditional pay television. And that's because there's no live sports. New programming is dried up. And so consumers have actually left more quickly than they were before the traditional pay TV ecosystem and moved into streaming devices and services like Roku. So we've seen a real acceleration of device purchases and streaming on our platform as a result. Advertising is a very important part of our business, as you can see from what Bill and I have just discussed. The ad industry as a whole is down right now. That's not unique to Roku, but even there, in the streaming business, advertising continues to grow fairly strongly. And I think all this just points to the fact that the pandemic actually is just accelerating, as often happens, accelerating trends that already were underway.
Got it. Yeah, I think that really makes sense. I think that goes back to what we were talking about before of, maybe having some kind of shared experiences module, and, video gaming has gotten really popular too. So there are lots of ideas around there. Well, it looks like we're almost out of time today. Thank you so much for your time, Scott and Bill. I know we had a lot of insightful comments from the audience, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
And if you're joining for the next session, Why AI Needs Journalism, that will start in